Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Treasury of Constantinople. This week we'll talk about an interesting set of coins called Anonymous Follis. Before we get into it, some context. In 498 AD, Emperor Anastasius reformed the imperial coinage system, introducing four main denominations. Those are the follis, worth 40 numia, the half follis, worth 20 numia, the decennumian, worth 10 numia, and the pentanumian, worth 5 numia, plus a few other odd ones. Over time, though, the lower denominations began disappearing. The absolute last half follis to be minted were those of Leo VI at the turn of the 9th century, but they had been pretty uncommon since the end of the Isaurian dynasty 100 years earlier. So by the 900s, the only bronze coin in circulation was the follis, worth 40 numia, and about 180 to 280 of those together would be worth 1 gold solidus. The design of the follis coins varied between emperors, mints, and denominations, but they had one thing in common. The obverse showed the portrait of the emperor, and the reverse showed the value of the coin. In 969, John I Zamiskis came up with a completely different design. He replaced the portrait of the emperor with that of Christ, and the value with various iterations of the legend Jesus Christ King of Kings, or May Jesus Christ Conquer. Why exactly John thought up of doing this is a mystery. There are some speculations, but they are just that, speculations. Note that it has no relation to iconoclasm either, as iconoclasm was a rejection of the worship of icons, i.e. images, and despite the different designs, all types of anonymous follies very clearly display the image of Christ. In any case, John was not one of the iconoclast emperors. Finally, I've heard that perhaps these anonymous follies were a bit of a response to the Muslims, who stopped copying Byzantine follies and instead minted their own coins inscribed with the Shahada, "There is only a single God," a very strong statement against any kind of paganism, idolatry, and bundled with that, the elevation of Jesus to being Son of God. Adelaide says this last one doesn't make sense, because John's reign was in the 900s, and Muslims were minting their own coins way back in the late 600s, so that would be a response 300 years late. So, a mystery it is. Now you may ask, well, if bronze coins from this point on no longer show either the name or the portrait, or any other identifying information about the ruler who struck them, how do we know who they belong to? A very good question indeed, and unfortunately not one that the Byzantines were considerate enough to leave in the records to explain to future generations. So modern numismats had to figure it out by themselves. The way they did it was very ingenious. Step number 1 was figuring out how many different kinds of anonymous follies there were. This was easy enough, 16 or so. Step number 2 was to put them in chronological order. This was a tedious job, but not an impossible one. In fact, many anonymous follies are overstruck on earlier coins, so by poring over thousands of overstrikes, the order of the types can be deduced, and thus it has been possible to reconstruct the sequence of this series of coins with a fair degree of certainty. Then, they assigned each type a letter from A to K. Note that Class A is subdivided into classes A1, A2, and A3. It is known from ancient sources that the first type of anonymous follies belonged to John I, so Class A1 is set. And from Constantine X to Alexios, every emperor minted both named follis as well as anonymous follis, so it's easy to infer who the anonymous follies belong to from overstrikes on the name types. So classes E through K are also set. That leaves classes A2, A3, B, C, and D. The problem then is that between John I and Constantine X, there are 8 emperors. The attributions of these classes are disputed. And while it would be nicer if new types were introduced when rulers changed, there is no evidence that either proves or disproves that that's the case. Thompson and Sear took the no need to overthink it approach and assigned the disputed anonymous types to rulers with longer reigns and ignored the ones with very short reigns. Grierson agreed to disagree and made his own propositions. In any case, there really are out there a lot of anonymous follies with clear and identifiable overstrikes, so it might be interesting to collect them. They're not only a part of history, but a part of how historians figure out history. As to where these coins were minted, it seems like all were minted in Constantinople. Although they don't feature any mint marks, since way back in the time of Justinian II, the only mints in regular use were Constantinople and Syracuse. But Syracuse fell in 878, so everyone agrees all the Anonymous Follis types were most likely minted in Constantinople. Now, let's have a closer look at each of the types. As mentioned before, Class A is subdivided in 3 types: A1, A2, and A3. All 3 have the same general design. The obverse shows a facing bust of Christ, with a nimbate cross behind, holding the Gospels with both hands. To the left and right, there is the legend, Jesus Christ, and above, God is with us. The reverse has the legend, Jesus Christ, King of Kings, in 4 lines. For the sake of your ears, I'll be saying the translation of all the legends in English, but they're all originally in Greek. Class A1 was minted during the reign of John I and is the smallest and thinnest of the 3 types, 20 to 25 millimeters, usually on the smaller side, and weighs around 5 to 8 grams. They are frequently overstruck on follies of Nicephorus II or Constantine VII. Class A2 and A3 were most likely minted during the reigns of Basil II and Constantine VIII. Basil and Constantine were actually brothers and technically co-emperors, but during Basil's long 49-year reign, Constantine was doing his own thing. When Basil died, Constantine became sole emperor. He ruled for only 3 years until he too died. So Sier's attribution of the 2 types to both emperors together makes sense. Class A2 and A3 have a similar design to Class A1, but include many ornaments on the Book of Gospels, in the limbs of the halo's cross, and above and below the reverse inscription. There are over 60 varieties of decorations between the 2 classes, so if you really like Anonymous Follies, it could be interesting to collect types with different ornamentations. They're fairly affordable too. The only real difference between Class A2 and A3 is the size, with Class A2 being between 28 to 34 millimeters and weighing 11 to 20 grams, while Class A3 measures 23 to 29 millimeters and weighs less than 10 grams. Distinguishing these 2 classes is more of an art, and let's remember, these classes were more or less invented, so A2 and A3 could be, and are by some, considered to be a single class. Class B was minted during the reign of Romanus III according to Sier, and Michael IV according to Grierson. The obverse shows a facing bust of Christ, with a nimbate cross behind, holding the Gospels with both hands. The Gospel has 4 dots that form a square, and then another dot in the middle. To the left and right, there is the legend, Jesus Christ, and above, God is with us. The reverse has the legend, Jesus Christ, King of Kings, in 3 lines surrounding a cross on 3 steps. The words Jesus Christ are abbreviated. Class B coins are often overstruck on Class A2. Their diameter is usually between 20 and 29 millimeters, and the weight around 5 to 10 grams. Class C was minted during the reign of Michael IV, according to Sier, and Constantine IX, according to Grierson. The obverse of this type is visibly different from the previous ones. You can see a 3/4 length figure of Christ, not just the bust, with a nimbate cross behind. He is raising his right hand and holding the Book of Gospels with the left. Like the previous coin types, to the left and right there is the legend, Jesus Christ, and above, God is with us. The reverse is quite striking. There's a jeweled cross with an abbreviation of the legend, May Jesus Christ conquer, on the angles. Sier's reasoning for attributing this coin to the reign of Michael IV is that the Christ on the obverse is called Christ Antiphanetes, Christ the one who responds, and comes from a famous icon that Michael's wife Zoe particularly liked. Now, our Empress Zoe then went on to marry Constantine IX. The Emperor Grierson attributes this coin to, so make of that what you will. Class C Anonymous Follis are often overstruck on Class B types. They measure around 24 to 29 millimeters and weigh 6 to 11 grams. Class D was minted during the reign of Constantine IX. Grierson says yes during Constantine IX's reign, but only after the death of Zoe in 1050. The obverse of the coin features Christ seated facing on a throne with a nimbate cross behind and holding the Gospels with both hands. To the left and right there is the legend, Jesus Christ. The reverse brings back the abbreviated inscription, Jesus Christ, King of Kings, in 3 lines from Class B. There are ornamental lines and a cross above, and ornamental lines and a crescent below. The figure of Christ in the obverse probably comes from an icon as well, and it appears on some of the gold coins of both Constantine IX and Isaac I. This type usually measures 26 to 32 millimeters and weighs around 7 to 11 grams. As mentioned, from Class E onwards, both Sear and Grierson agree on the attribution, so Class E is from the reign of Constantine X. The reverse is exactly the same as Class D, with the abbreviated inscription Jesus Christ King of Kings in 3 lines, the ornamental lines and a cross above, and ornamental lines and crescent below. The obverse is different though. It displays a facing bust of Christ with a nimbate cross behind, holding Gospels with both hands, and the legend Jesus Christ to the left and right. Class E Anonymous Follis are quite rare. The reason may be that Constantine X was the first emperor to revive named Follis, of which he had 2 types. So even if the mints continued producing the same amount of bronze coins as before, only a certain percentage of them would be Class E Anonymous Follis. Class F is also attributed to Constantine X. It also rare, and usually overstruck on Class E. Its design on both the obverse and reverse is identical to Constantine IX's Class D, with one small difference. On the reverse of Class D types, there are ornamental lines and a cross above, and ornamental lines and crescent below, while on Class F, there are ornamental lines and a cross both above and below. Which admittedly is not very clear in the picture, but just trust me, that's a cross. The diameter and weight are similar to Class D as well. Class G is attributed to Romanus IV. The obverse shows the bust of Christ with a nimbate cross behind, his right hand is raised, and there's a scroll in the left hand, the legend Jesus Christ, to the left and right. Everything is within a border of dots. The reverse displays for the first time in any bronze coin the bust of the Virgin Mary, hands raised, and the legend Mother of God to the left and right, all inside a border of dots. Class G follies are often overstruck on named Constantine X Follis. Class G follis are noticeably smaller and lighter than the previous Anonymous Follis, usually measuring around 23 to 26 millimeters and weighing 5 to 8 grams. Class H is attributed to Michael VII. The obverse shows the bust of Christ with a nimbate cross behind, holding the Book of Gospels in both hands. Like in Class B, there are 4 dots forming a square and a dot in the middle. To the left and right, there is the legend Jesus Christ. The reverse shows the patriarchal cross with globe and dots at each extremity, floral ornament on either side of lower fields. Class H follis are sometimes overstruck on Class F follis. This type is also small, measuring around 23 to 26 millimeters, and lighter than all previous follies, weighing 4 to 6 grams. Class I was minted during the reign of Nicephorus III. The obverse, as usual, shows the bust of Christ with a nimbate cross behind, and the right hand is raised, while the left hand is holding the Gospels. The book has the dots like Classes B and H. To the left and right, there is the legend, Jesus Christ. The reverse is different. It displays a Latin cross with an X at center, a globe and 2 dots at the ends of each arm. There are crescents at the top left and right, and floral ornaments in the lower left and right fields. Classy follis are sometimes overstruck on Michael VII's named and Anonymous Follis. Also, by this time, the empire was under increasing economic stress, so the follies were getting lighter and of lesser quality. Though you can still find Class I types as big as 28 millimeters, they are noticeably thinner. Classes J and K are both attributed to the beginning of Alexius I's reign. The obverse of Class J shows again the bust of Christ facing, with a nimbate cross behind. The right hand is raised, and the left hand is holding the Gospels. To the left and right there is the legend Jesus Christ. The reverse shows a cross with a globe and 2 dots at each end of the arms, an X in the center, and a large crescent below. Around the cross there are 4 more globes surrounded by small dots. Class J types are sometimes overstruck on follies of Nicephorus III. They usually measure 20 to 24 millimeters and weigh 2 to 5 grams. Class K is very similar to Class G. No need to repeat myself with the obverse, but note it's inside a circle of large dots, bigger dots than Class G. The reverse shows a 3/4 length figure of the Virgin Mary, hands raised, all again inside a border of large dots. This type is sometimes overstruck on Class J, and like Class J, this type is rather small and light. In 1192, Alexius reformed the Byzantine coinage system and did away with the Anonymous Follis. So there you go, 123 years of Anonymous Follis explained in 15 minutes. There are actually a few more Anonymous Follies, classes L, M, and N, but they are, number 1, extremely rare, and number 2, even more extremely hard to attribute. It's been suggested they're from the reign of Nicephorus III and Alexius I, but it's also possible, given the small amount of coins found, that they were minted by pretenders to the throne, so we don't know. And that's it for this one. If we made any mistakes or missed anything important about this topic, please leave a nicely worded comment below. Have a nice morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you're watching this video. And I hope to see you next time. Also, if you like collecting coins, or know someone who does, feel free to check out Adelaide's eBay store, the Spanish Galleon. We're also on Instagram, links in the description.